Hi folks, so we're back here with this AU 11000. After reviewing some of the videos I've already posted, I believe I gave short shrift to how I got the boards out. So we're going to spend a little more time and I'll show you how to get the boards in. Basically the same process in reverse. So we'll take a look at that. I also want to talk about some of the things that aren't shown on the schematic but did wind up being on circuit boards in this unit. Some of the electrolytic capacitors I changed out had resistors soldered to one leg. So they look something like this. And when I replaced them, I also replaced them with a new resistor, not because there's anything wrong with the old one, just because it made for a neater installation. Also, aside from cleaning all the switches and pots, I take a jack like this, just a 1/4 inch phone, and I put contact cleaner on it and I spin it inside the headphone jack to clean that out as well. There's a lot of things that we miss when we're going through this process and want to try and touch upon all of them. And also, talking about cleaning pots and switches, there's a subscriber to this channel named Mark Zacharias. Now Mark has some videos well worth watching and he really knows his stuff. And he mentioned that he had been using Deoxit D5 in pots for years with no ill effects. And frankly, I did too for a long time. But I started reading about people having bad experiences with it. And if you look on YouTube, one of my favorite YouTubers is X-Ray Tony B. And he did a video on, you can look it up under embalmed pots. He had a problem spraying D5 in the pots and it just caused him trouble. So with that in mind, even though I've never had any bad experiences and Mark apparently didn't either, I don't want to take any chances because this stuff is not getting any easier to find. The parts are no longer available, especially parts like pots and switches. As a matter of fact, I want to show you, this is all that's left of the power switch. The back piece is missing. I believe I found a donor in some of my units here. I have an AU 719 that has a bad power transformer. I haven't been able to find one anywhere, and I've had it a couple of years. So I'm thinking about parting that out. I think I got to get some of the switches out of that to use in here. But anyhow, let's get on to this. I've checked these boards out. They're all ready for reinstallation. I've double checked to make sure I didn't make any mistakes because it's going to be a pain to get them back out of here again. And I just don't want the aggravation or the wear and tear. After we get those back in, we're getting close to the finish line. We're going to have to pull the output modules to get to the transistors because they're going to get new micas and new heatsink compound. Now, I talked about using micas and heatsink compound or using sill pads. Sill pads are perfectly acceptable, but I'm an old-fashioned boy, and I do like the mica and the heatsink compound. It's a little messy, but you know, some of the best things in life are a little messy. So with that in mind, let's start putting this thing back together. Good morning, folks. So it's another day. It's my birthday. And I'm out here in the garage. It's pretty early in the morning. It's bright and early, and I'm not usually bright when it's early, but nevertheless, we're going to start putting this back together. So, one of the first things I do when I have something like this, and this is a unit I'm frankly not that familiar with, is we can't really tell by looking at the front panel which switch or pot is what. So I grab the front panel, and I take a pencil, and I just lightly mark what each one of these holes is for. And that greatly aids in the reinstallation process. And it's penciled. You can always erase it if it offends you, but nobody's going to see it inside the front panel, so I'll leave it there for the next guy that takes this apart. So anyway, the first thing we're going to install is this board right here. This is the 2574. Has the volume control on it, so we know because we looked that it goes in here. And I do recall it was the last board to come out. So basically what we do is we just kind of work it in, and if you can see down in here, and tell you what, let's get a little closer look. Okay, so we're going to put in the F2574 board. This has the volume control and the tone and filter switch on here. And We also have the bag that has the hardware for the F2574. So we know these are the correct nuts and washers that are going to go on the front. So we don't have a lot of room back here, so we have to kind of angle this in and make sure each pot and switch goes through its correct hole. And then all we have to do is turn it around. I'm going to move the camera here. Hit everything in sight. Kick it a few times just for good measure. And here we go. So now we just take our hardware out of the bag, secure that, and we're ready for the next board. Okay, so I'm just going to do these finger tight because you really don't need to see me tighten these things up. I'm pretty sure everybody here can figure that out for themselves. But anyway, we just want to get these put on here to hold it into place, and on to the next board. I believe the next board are going to be our tone boards, and there are 2 of those. So I may have to consult some of the many pictures I took and see if that'll help guide me. But anyway, they're going to go into here for the push buttons, and the pots will be coming through here. Okay, so the next board we're going to install here is going to be our F2576. This is the bass and treble board. And this is going to be fun because we got these guys hanging off the bottom that we're going to have to put back on. Now, I usually try to keep a magnetized bit like this with a screw in there, so I'm ready to at least secure one of them. Yeah, this would be one of those cases where 4 hands would even be better than 3, and we're dealing with 2 here. So, we need to get these in, and again, we don't have a lot of room to work, but here's what we're going to have to do. And I tell you, the fun just never stops. Okay, so we have these out through the holes in the front. And I'm not going to worry about securing those because we've got to get these switchboards mounted in here. And that's where this comes in handy. As I drop it. Okay. Okay, so that's good. Secure another one in there. Okay. Get this board in. All right, so that gets the switches mounted, and then we can, by the way, we have a connector we have to slide onto the back here as well. So I didn't really want to secure this until that was back on. Again, space is at a premium in here. Okay, I know you can't see what I'm doing in here, but basically I'm fumbling, so you can imagine. Okay, I'm going to stop the camera because there's no need for you to not see what's going on here. So I want to show you the cause of my fumbling. I was trying to get this connector onto here, whereas this connector goes to the mid board, which is going to be the next one that we put in. And that's why it wouldn't fit, because Sansui was smart enough to know there'd be guys like me trying to put the wrong connector on, and they keyed them differently. So that saved me from making an error. These are not keyed alike, so this connector will only fit on this board. This one will fit on the mid board, which is going to be the next one we install. Okay, so here's the F2575 mid board, and that goes in right above the bass and treble board. And we know because we marked it. Now, I'm not sure what direction it has to go, but I believe the connector is going to guide me in that respect, because as I mentioned, it's keyed. And if we look at the spaces, we can see that this board actually has to go in like this in order for this connector, which has been in the same position for years, to fit. Also gives room because we have these two switches for the bass and treble, and we have to get this in, so it's going to go in like this. Again, I could refer to my pictures, but sometimes there's just only one way something will go in. And I may have had to put this in first. You know what? I think I may have to take these back out. I don't remember how I disassembled it, but this has to go in above it, and I really don't know if there's going to be room to do that. So again, I'm going to fumble off camera, and I'll explain if I had to take this back out or not. Okay, so I did wind up having to pull out the first board I put in, and whenever I work on something like this and I come across an issue, I always make notes. And you can see here, it's a must to have a computer out at your bench. I have notes that I keep in folders I have organized. I'm not sure how well you can read this, but I have everything up on Google Drive. I have a folder under Google Drive called Stereo Equipment, sorted by manufacturer, and then I have individual folders under that manufacturer that will have all the pertinent data for that particular unit. So I have the service manual, I have some notes that I took from an audio forum I'm a member of, and I have my repair notes, which I'm just now creating. And that way, whenever I see another one, I'm not going to remember this stuff because I see so many different things. The computer really helps keep you organized, but you do have to put the work in. Okay, so the last board that has to go in is our F2573 board. This is our filter and accessory circuit board. Now, there are 3 connectors that we have to reconnect on here, and I had 4. Now that kind of screwed me up, but what happened was I had to pull one of the connectors from the 27 phono board down here. I had to remove this connector to get those boards out. And this is where taking pictures saved my bacon, because I was able to see the color orientation and determine this was a connector I had to fish up through the bottom here and plug back in. Now we have the right number of connectors. It's just a matter of pushing this board in, reconnecting these, reconnecting this, and we'll be ready to test this. So I'm going to put this together off camera, And incidentally, I do want to mention that when I put screws in, you may notice I use a screwdriver, but I'll often use my cordless screwdriver to take them out. I don't want to take any chances on cross-threading screws, so I always try to start them by hand. Now you can use the cordless screwdriver, but put it in reverse first and listen for clicks or feel for clicks to let you know that you're in the thread hole. But I like to do it in my hand because occasionally they will use different thread pitches in a panel or in something you're taking apart, and you can get the screws mixed up even if they're in the same bag because they came from the same place. I always just like to start it by hand. You don't want to damage anything. I don't want to damage any threads. And so it's just easier to start them by hand. Okay, if you recall, our cardinal rule here is whenever you've done some work, bring it up on the dim bulb tester. It's just so much easier to stay out of trouble. So we're going to flip it on. Bulb glows brightly and slowly dims down. So I don't know if you remember, and it comes out of protection. Don't know if you remember, but before we changed out the filter caps, the bulb would dim down much more rapidly because it had a lot less capacitance due to the aging and degradation of the original filter caps. Now it takes a little longer, which is a good thing. That means we have more filtering, more capacitance, which usually results in increased bottom end and just a snappier overall presentation in the audio. How's that for flowery audiophile speak? But it usually does result in better audio, and that's really our goal here. So now I'm going to hook it up and listen to it and make sure that all the tone controls are working as they're supposed to, all the filters are working, all the pots are clean. Just a general check out before I tighten all those screws and nuts down. Okay, so this guy passed the dim bulb test, and we're going to crank it up and see what we can get out of here. So let's see, we're now at the onset of clipping. All right there. Yeah, we got about, oh hell, I'd say 108, 109. Just starts to clip here around 120. Okay, and if you notice, that imbalance is gone, and it was a good 30-40 watts a channel. So this thing's looking really good. I'm going to hook it up and listen to it and see if all the tone controls are working the way they're supposed to, all the filters are working the way they're supposed to. We can feed a square wave in and check out some of these things. And why don't we do that? So we put our signal in. Doesn't have to be very high. And we're just looking for changes in the shape of the square wave. There we go. Looks pretty square. So let me see. Have to consult the front panel. And the feet is right center on the selector. Let me see where we are. Okay, so filter only, tone and filter, and that's because all these guys are turned every which way. Okay, and I'm seeing some problems between left and right channel, and we're going to have to look at that and see why we have that. Okay, so as I pointed out, we got a problem with the tone controls here. Now the left channel, which is the top, looks fine, but the right channel, the bottom trace, is pretty much unaffected by the tone controls. And I'm not sure what's going on here. But here's something that's interesting. With the tone controls in, we're 180 degrees out of phase. Yet if I put it into, if I defeat the tone controls, we're back in phase. So I need to find out what happened to these tone controls, or if I simply have a connector on wrong. Okay, finally found what the problem was. It took a while for me to get this straightened out. But anyhow, on the bass and treble board, and this is a fairly complex tone and filter control circuit. The signal actually passes through the mid-range first, and if you recall, the mid-range worked okay on both channels, and the bass and treble worked okay on one channel as well. So this was good, and it was passing good signal into here, but when I got to the right channel, and I just marked the left one because the left one has all the values here, and I didn't print out both channels. You've seen one, you've seen them both. In any event, the voltages I wrote down in blue are good voltages that I took from the left channel, and the ones in red are the voltages I was actually getting on the right channel. You can see they're way out. I should have had 0 volts going in here. I had 28.3. I should have had 0.5 volts at the common emitter here. I had 30.5 volts. I was supposed to have essentially 0 volts here, but I got some of the readings from the other channel because the schematic doesn't put them in, and basically they were all wrong. And what happens, or what's supposed to happen, is that this transistor will bias and turn this transistor on and go back and drop these voltages. Long story short, I had a break in the printed circuit board, and you can see it in this picture I'm putting up right now, and that break was on the base, I believe, right here. Once I repaired that, everything started to work right. And another mistake I had made, or a problem that I wasn't paying attention to, is my distortion analyzer. It was a very expensive piece of equipment, and it's very comprehensive, but one thing it does that I had not thought about in this problem is it auto ranges each channel independently. So the signal we were seeing was really a very, very weak signal. It looked like it was more than it was, but when I started testing it after I turned the camera off, I could get up to 40, 50 watts in the left channel, and I'd have maybe 1 or 2 in the right. So our problem was right here. Fixing that straightened it out. So now, if we turn this thing on and take a look at the scope and the distortion analyzer, you can see everything looks a lot better. Okay, so I've turned it back on. I'm still feeding in a square wave, and you can see now, treble, both channels, looks good. Mid, never had any problem with that. Bass, so everything here is looking like it's working fine, and indeed I believe it is. So now all I have to check is the turnover ranges. They are looking good. So now let's see. Now we just have to do a few more things here. We're going to pull the power amp modules, replace the micas, and re-grease them. And I don't think there's a whole lot more that we have to do on this. I'm going to make another video when I replace the power switch. And the owner said he wants to have an IEC power cord put on here, and he wants the speaker terminals modified. I'm going to have to spend some time thinking about that, but we are just about done with this thing now. So anyway, that concludes this video. Everything's working. You know what? I'm going to pause this. We're going to play some music through here. Okay, so I got some YouTube safe music. I don't remember the artist's name. I'm going to have to look that up. Okay, don't want to put stretch marks on my bench speakers, but anyway, everything seems to be working really well. All the switches and all the pots are cleaned up. I'm really pleased with the way it's been coming along, so I'm going to stop this video here. And as always, I like giving back to the community that's given me so much. Thanks a lot, folks.